The attic was silent, except for the soft creak of floorboards under Daniel Blake's knees. Dust floated like memory in the golden shaft of sunlight pouring through the small round window. Around him were boxes marked in his late wife's handwriting, gentle cursive, still so alive it made his chest ache. Karen's books, winter scarves, for Daniel, later. He reached for a faded blue sweater, one she used to wear on cold mornings while sipping coffee and watching the birds. Her scent, vanilla and lavender, lingered in the fabric. For a moment, he pressed it to his face, eyes shut, heart breaking all over again. It had been over a year since she passed, and yet the world still felt dim. The laughter in their home had gone quiet. The air felt too still, too heavy. Friends had stopped checking in. The casseroles stopped coming. Grief had become routine. Then he saw it, tucked into the flap of a worn leather journal, a letter addressed simply to him. If you're reading this, I'm gone. But I have one last request. Don't let my things become dust. Give them life again. Share them. Someone out there needs warmth. And through you, I can still give it. Daniel stared at the words, his throat tight. He didn't know where to begin. But he knew he had to try. It was time to let love live on. Daniel Blake had always been a quiet soul, steady, dependable, and deeply in love with the woman who once made life feel like spring even in the dead of winter. Karen had been the vibrant one. She taught art at the local high school, wore bright scarves year-round, and insisted on planting sunflowers every spring. Even if they look ridiculous in front of a brick house, she'd laugh. Their small Oregon home had been filled with light, music, and soft arguments about how many bookshelves were too many. They had hoped for children, tried for years, but after a series of heartbreaking losses, they let go of that dream. Instead, they poured their love into each other and into their community, volunteering at food drives, reading to kids at the library, and befriending anyone who looked like they needed a warm smile. Karen's kindness was effortless, Daniel's was quieter, but no less real. Then came the cancer. Quick. Unforgiving. It stole her laughter first, then her strength, and finally her breath. Daniel held her hand through every appointment, every sleepless night. He would have traded places with her in a second, but the world doesn't work that way. After her passing, he drifted. He retired early from his teaching job. Stopped going to the farmer's market. Barely spoke to anyone outside of the monthly grocery run. The house felt like a mausoleum, filled with things that once had meaning but now only echoed her absence. He thought he was honoring her by keeping it all untouched. Her scarves remained in drawers, her favorite books on the nightstand, her notes still pinned to the fridge. But instead of bringing comfort, they became reminders that she was never coming back. Then he found the letter. She had written it without telling him, stashed it in her journal, just in case. And in it, she gave him the one thing he hadn't had since she left, purpose. Give them to someone who needs them, she wrote. Don't let my love sit in boxes. Let it keep someone else warm. That's when Daniel knew, grief had frozen him, but maybe kindness could thaw what was left. The next morning, Daniel rose early, earlier than he had in months. The letter still rested on the kitchen table beside his untouched coffee. He glanced at it one more time, then looked around the home they had built together. It was time. He started with Karen's scarves. He packed them gently, folding each one like a sacred relic. Vibrant reds, calming blues, soft greens, each one told a story. The maroon wool one she wore on their trip to Vermont. The yellow one from their anniversary in New Orleans. He bundled them into a canvas bag and drove to the women's shelter 2 towns over, the one Karen used to donate to every Christmas. When he arrived, he hesitated in the parking lot. His fingers gripped the steering wheel like a lifeline. Part of him wanted to drive away, to go back to the familiar ache of loneliness. But then he thought of her words. Let it keep someone else warm. Inside, a young woman named Megan greeted him. She had tired eyes and a warmth that reminded him of Karen in her early teaching years. When he explained why he'd come, Megan placed a hand over her heart and whispered, "Your wife must have had a beautiful soul." She did, Daniel said softly, his voice breaking. That day, Daniel watched as Megan passed out the scarves to women in the shelter, many of them clutching the soft fabric with tears in their eyes. A teenage girl pulled a purple scarf around her shoulders and smiled. It smells like flowers, she said. Daniel felt something shift. Not quite healing, but something close. A crack in the ice. The next week, he brought books to the local community center. Then coats to the refugee resettlement agency. Art supplies to the school where Karen had once taught. With each act, her presence seemed to whisper through him. Not gone. Just moving through others now. And at every stop, he'd tell them, these belong to my wife. She believed love should never be wasted. And with every gift he gave away, Daniel realized, he wasn't just letting go. He was keeping her alive in the most beautiful way he could. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's routine transformed. He became known around town, not as the man who lost his wife, but as the quiet man who kept showing up with kindness tucked under his arm. At the children's hospital, he donated Karen's stack of illustrated books and her collection of watercolor supplies. A boy with leukemia, no older than 7, painted a sunflower and insisted Daniel keep it. He framed it and placed it on Karen's nightstand. At the local refugee center, he gave away Karen's winter coats, her boots, and even some of her handmade mittens. A young mother named Amira wept as she slipped on a soft gray coat. I've never owned something so warm, she whispered. Thank you, thank her. The more Daniel gave, the more he found himself talking about Karen, about love, about loss. He shared stories he hadn't told even his closest friends. And as he gave, others started giving too. Inspired by his quiet mission, the high school students Karen once taught organized a community drive in her name, Karen's Kindness Week. They collected warm clothing, books, and toiletries for local shelters. Daniel was invited as a guest of honor. Standing in the school auditorium, watching students pack boxes with enthusiasm, he felt something he hadn't in over a year, pride and joy. One evening, he returned to the shelter with another bag of Karen's sweaters and found Megan waiting outside. She handed him a small, hand-bound notebook. I've been asking people who received something from you to write a note, she said. About how it made them feel. About her. About you. Daniel opened the book. The first entry read, I never thought a stranger's scarf could make me feel human again. Another said, I wrap this around me and pretend someone cares. Maybe they really do. Tears filled his eyes. Karen hadn't just left him with memories, she had given him a path forward. Through her belongings, her warmth, and his willingness to love again, strangers had become threads in a greater tapestry. Each note was a stitch. Each act of kindness a color. And Daniel, once frozen in grief, now stood at the heart of something alive. Spring arrived early that year. Daniel sat on the porch, a cup of chamomile tea warming his hands, watching the wind ripple through the sunflowers blooming wildly in the front yard, just as Karen would have wanted. For the first time in over a year, he didn't flinch when a memory surfaced. He welcomed it, like a familiar friend returning home. The scrapbook Megan had given him, the one filled with stories from those touched by Karen's things, sat beside him. He read a few lines every morning, letting their words soak into him like sunlight through old windows. Each page reminded him that Karen's love hadn't ended. It had multiplied. That morning, as he flipped through the book, a note slipped out, handwritten, in fresh ink. It read, Dear Mr. Blake, I don't know you, but I wore your wife's red scarf to my college interview last month. I got in. I felt brave, like she was with me. I want to be a social worker, just like she was. Thank you for giving me something more than warmth. You gave me courage. Lena, age 18. Daniel closed his eyes and let the tears come, not out of sorrow, but gratitude. He had spent so long grieving what was lost, he hadn't realized what had grown in its place. Later that afternoon, he visited Karen's grave, a bouquet of fresh wildflowers in hand. As he knelt down, he spoke softly. I kept my promise, he said. They weren't just things. They were your love. And now, they're everywhere. The wind stirred, brushing his cheek like a kiss. As he stood to leave, someone called out behind him. Mr. Blake. He turned to see Megan, holding a little girl's hand. This is Lily. She's one of the children who got your wife's storybooks. She wanted to meet you. Lily ran up and hugged him without hesitation. Daniel smiled, heart full. For the first time since Karen's passing, he didn't feel alone. Love had not died with her. It had simply changed hands. And in giving it away, piece by piece, Daniel had unknowingly received it back, tenfold.